Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at how privileged access management, that's PAM, is changing the world of IT and programming.
Yeah, making sure those servers are locked down, that data is protected, all that code is safe.
It's really important stuff, and I think we've got a great expert with us today to help us understand it all.
Happy to be here.
So you've been working in this field for a while, right?
Yeah, for a long time now.
I mean, you've even written some books on the topic.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field, and it's always changing, too.
Definitely seems like there's always something new to learn.
And PAM is really fascinating because it's not just about security, but also compliance.
Yeah, true.
You got to keep the bad guys out.
Yeah.
But you also got to prove you're following the rules, all those GDPR, IPI regulations and stuff.
Right, exactly.
And that's where someone like Bert Blevins comes in. He's like a leading voice in the PAM world.
Yeah, I've been looking at some of his stuff. It's really impressive.
He's great at explaining things in a way that makes sense, even for those of us who aren't, total tech wizards.
Yeah, he used to be a professor, too.
Right. So he knows how to break things down and make them clear.
That's so important in a field like this.
For sure. One of the things he talks about is the core functions of PAM in an ITP environment.
Okay.
And secure password management. That's one of the big ones.
Oh.
He's really pushing for going beyond just basic password rules.
Like having a capital letter and a number.
Right, exactly. He's talking about using encrypted vaults and systems that force you to change your password frequently.
Makes sense. I mean, it's not enough to just have a complex password anymore. You got to make sure it's really protected.
Yeah, you need a whole system that makes it almost impossible to crack those passwords.
So it's a more robust approach, for sure.
Definitely. And it's not just about passwords either.
Okay, what else?
Multi-factor authentication, or MFA. That's another super important layer of security.
Oh, yeah. I'm seeing that everywhere these days. Every website wants me to enter a code from my phone.
Right. And for good reason. It's like that extra verification step.
You know, to make sure it's really...
Exactly. It makes it way harder for someone to get in, even if they somehow steal your password.
It's like a double lock on your digital door.
Exactly. And then there's also real-time monitoring and session recording.
Okay, that sounds kind of intense. Is that like having security cameras for your computer systems?
It's actually very similar. It lets organizations see exactly what's happening in their systems, especially with those privileged accounts.
So if someone's trying to get into something, they shouldn't.
The system can flag it right away.
Makes sense. So it's not just about preventing attacks, it's about detecting them quickly too.
Exactly. And that ties into another big concept that Blevins talks about, the principle of least privilege access.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not totally sure what it means.
Basically, it's about giving people the minimum amount of access they need to do their jobs, no more, no less.
So like if someone just needs to use the stapler, you don't give them the key to the whole supply closet?
That's a great way to put it. It limits the damage if an account does get compromised.
So even if someone gets in, they can't do too much harm.
Right, and this is especially important in ITP, where you have developers working on sensitive code or system administrators managing really important infrastructure.
Yeah, in those situations, even a small security breach could be a huge problem.
Exactly. And there's actually a really good YouTube video by Blevins that goes into more detail about least privilege access, especially how it works in ITP and the benefits of using it. We should definitely recommend that later on.
I'll have to check that out, but it sounds like PAM is more than just about security. It's also a key part of making sure you're complying with all those regulations.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big part of how organizations meet those requirements, especially when it comes to creating those audit trails.
So it's like a record of who did what, when, and where in the system.
Right, and with data breaches happening more and more often, those trails are super important.
They can prove that you were following the rules.
Exactly. It's like a digital paper trail that protects you if something goes wrong.
Okay, so it's like a safety net.
Yeah, and beyond security and compliance, PAM also helps create a more secure environment overall.
How so?
Well, when you're not constantly worried about security breaches or trying to keep up with regulations, you can focus on other things.
Like what?
Like developing new technologies, improving your systems, really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in ITP.
Okay, so it's like having a solid foundation that lets you build something amazing.
Exactly. And in the world of ITP, where things are always changing, that kind of foundation is essential.
I can see that.
It gives you the stability and security you need to innovate and grow.
So we've talked about kind of the basics of PAM and, how it works in ITP, but what about the future?
Yeah.
I mean, tech is always changing. So how is that impacting PAM, especially with things like cloud computing and the Internet of Things?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's definitely getting more and more complex, right? We're moving away from that traditional model where everything was, like within a company's network.
Right.
With cloud services and people working remotely, it's all kind of blurring together.
Yeah. It's almost like trying to secure a moving target.
Exactly, and that's one of the biggest challenges for PAM right now.
Hmm.
Those traditional solutions that were built for on-premises environments are struggling to keep up.
So are we talking about like a whole new approach to PAM then?
Well, we are seeing a shift.
Yeah.
There's definitely more emphasis on cloud-based PAM platforms. The ones that can manage access across different environments.
Okay.
Like on-premises servers and cloud applications, and even those IoT devices you mentioned. It's about having that one solution that can give you visibility and control over everything.
That makes sense, but doesn't that make it even more complex? I mean, managing access for all those different systems and devices.
It does, and that's why we're seeing so much innovation in things like automation and AI.
Okay, so how is that working?
Well, PAM solutions are getting smarter.
Yeah.
They can automatically detect and respond to threats and grant or revoke access based on user behavior.
Wow.
They can even predict future security risks. It's pretty amazing to see how these technologies are being used.
So it's not just about building bigger walls, it's about making those walls smarter.
Exactly, and it's not just about the technology either. The human element is still super important.
I was going to ask about that because you could have the best PAM solutions in the world, but what if people aren't using them right?
Right.
Or what if they fall for a phishing scam or accidentally give away their credentials?
That's a great point. User education and training are absolutely essential.
Yeah.
People need to understand why PAM is important and how to use the tools properly and how to spot those security threats.
It's about creating a culture of security awareness.
Exactly. It's about making everyone part of the solution.
So instead of just relying on technology, you're empowering people to be the first line of defense.
Exactly. And that brings us back to Bert Blevins.
Huh?
He's a big advocate for this kind of holistic approach to security, focusing on both the tech and the human side.
Yeah, I'm seeing that he really seems to understand this whole field.
He does.
Yeah.
And he's not just talking about it. He's actually shaping the future of PAM. Well, he's written a lot about new trends like DevSecOps, which is where security is integrated into the whole software development process,
Okay.
and zero trust architecture, which assumes that nobody can be trusted by default.
Those sound pretty complicated. Can you explain them a little more? Like, what do they mean for people who work in ITP?
Sure, so let's start with DevSecOps.
Okay.
Traditionally, security was kind of an afterthought in software development. You build the application first and then try to secure it later.
Right.
But with DevSecOps, security is built into every step of the process from the very beginning.
Okay.
It's all about collaboration between developers and security teams and operations teams. They all work together to build secure software from the ground up.
So it's about preventing those vulnerabilities rather than trying to fix them later.
Exactly, and that's where PAM comes in. It's used to secure access to development environments and manage source code repositories and make sure only authorized people can make changes.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about zero trust architecture? How does that work?
Well, zero trust is all about eliminating implicit trust.
Okay.
So instead of assuming that anyone or anything inside the network is safe, Zero Trust verifies every single access request, no matter where it's coming from.
So it's like having a security checkpoint at every door in your building instead of just at the main entrance.
Exactly. It's about having multiple layers of security like identity verification and device authentication and access control to create a really secure environment.
And PAM is a key part of that.
It is. It provides the tools and capabilities you need to enforce those access controls and monitor user activity and prevent unauthorized access.
Okay, so it's about making sure the right people have access to the right things at the right time.
Exactly. And it's a pretty big shift in mindset, going from that perimeter-based security to the zero trust approach.
It is a big shift, but it seems necessary with all the complexity in IT environments these days.
It is, and PAM is leading the way. It's really laying the foundation for a more secure digital future.
Okay, so I'm getting the sense that PAM is much more than just a set of tools. It's really like a philosophy.
Yeah.
A way of thinking about security that impacts everything an organization does.
You're absolutely right, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's not just about technology. It's about people and processes and culture.
Right.
It's about creating an environment where everyone is responsible for security and where organizations can innovate and grow without being afraid of getting hacked.
It's almost like a cultural shift towards a more secure way of working.
And Bert Blevins is one of the leaders of that movement.
Yeah.
He's really pushing for a more holistic and proactive approach to security, one that understands how technology and people and processes are all connected.
It sounds like he's a real visionary in this field. So what else can you tell us about him?
Well, besides being really knowledgeable, He's also really committed to community involvement and professional development.
Okay.
He's been a director for organizations like Rotary International and the American Heart Association.
Oh.
He's really dedicated to using his skills to make a difference.
It's great to see someone who's not just smart, but also uses their smarts to help others.
He's also a big believer in lifelong learning. He has tons of certifications and degrees, and he's even taught as an adjunct professor.
Okay.
He loves sharing his knowledge and passion with others.
It's clear that he's not just about learning things himself, but about helping other people learn and grow too.
And that's what makes him such a great figure in the world of PAM. He represents that idea of constantly learning and growing.
Right.
Because in a field like this, you can't just stop and be complacent. You have to keep moving forward.
He set a pretty high bar for the rest of us.
He has. But his example shows us that it's not about being the absolute best. It's about embracing that journey of learning and getting better.
It's about being curious and asking questions and never stopping learning.
Exactly. And that's something we can all do in our own lives and careers.
It's pretty amazing to see how PAM has come, from like those basic password vaults to these really sophisticated systems.
Right.
I mean, they manage access across these huge IT ecosystems.
It really is. It shows how fast things are changing in IT. And PM has had to keep up with that.
Yeah, especially with all the cyber threats out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that PAM is facing today?
Well, one of the biggest is just the sheer number of devices and applications that companies are using these days.
Right.
I mean, we've got cloud services and mobile devices and IoT sensors, all generating tons of data.
And they all need to be secure.
Right. And it's not just the number of devices, it's also how complex those cyber attacks are getting.
Yeah, true.
I mean, we're not just talking about basic password cracking anymore. These attackers are using all sorts of advanced techniques.
Like what?
Like social engineering and malware and even AI to try and break in.
So it's like PAM is in this constant arms race with the bad guys.
It really is. And that's why it's so important for organizations to stay ahead of the game. Make sure their PAM solutions are up to date.
So it's not enough to just set it and forget it.
No, you got to be paying attention, constantly making sure things are working.
And that brings us back to user education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even the best PAM system won't work if people aren't using it right or if they fall for those phishing scams.
Because at the end of the day, humans are often the weakest link.
Sadly, that's true. But it also means that they can be the strongest link.
How so?
If they're properly trained.
Yeah.
And that's something that Bert Blevins really stresses.
Right.
He talks about creating a culture of security where everyone understands their role.
So it's not just IT's problem anymore, it's everyone's responsibility.
Exactly. Everyone needs to be involved in keeping things secure.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I guess the main thing I want people to remember is that PAM is not just a technology, it's a journey.
A journey.
It's about constantly learning and adapting and improving. It's about embracing that security mindset in every part of your organization.
And it's a journey that everyone needs to be a part of.
Exactly. Everyone from the CEO to the intern.
Well said. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. We've really explored a lot about PAM today.
Yeah, we have.
From the core principles to how it's evolving and, its role in IT security and compliance.
We talked about securing passwords, multi-factor authentication, least privilege access.
And all those cloud-based solutions and new ideas like DevSecOps and zero trust architecture.
And of course, we had the insights from Bert Blevins.
Yeah, he really helped us understand not just the technical side of PAM, but also the human side, how important people are in all of this.
I think this has been a really interesting conversation, and I hope it's encouraged people to take security more seriously.
In their work and their personal lives.
Yeah, for sure.
We've only just scratched the surface, but hopefully this has been a good starting point for everyone.
It has.
So stay curious, stay informed,